So this is The End of the World, RELS 357W. And I'm Greg Cootsona. This is week 3. I want to offer some insights that will help in, I hope, your understanding what is going on with this end times thinking. And one of the key terms we've been looking at is this idea of millennial thinking, millenarianism, and particularly premillennialism. So the first, and this is the slide you're looking at, this idea of premillennialism is defined among some Christian Protestants, especially fundamentalists, as the doctrine, that is the teaching, that the prophesied millennium of blessedness will begin with the imminent second coming of Christ. So let me just unpack certain words there. So fundamentalists are the conservative Christians, I think, unfortunately, in my view, often associated with evangelicals, properly associated with evangelicals as having a tight system of belief based around the Bible, the evangel, the gospel, personal salvation in Jesus Christ, and the desire for others to come to know that personal salvation, the evangelistic side of it. But the fundamentalists have often been called the fighting fundies. It's a group that's really was identified in the beginning of the 20th century. And unfortunately, in recent popular press, you see evangelical used with right-wing politics and a kind of angry tone at times that often really is more fundamentalist. So that's the fundamentalist part. The doctrine, I think I mentioned in a moment ago, was the teaching. The millennium is the 1,000-year reign, and the important thing is it's Christ returns. Jesus returns as the Christ, the universal Christ, the King of all, to bring about the 1,000-year reign as spoken of in the book of Revelation. So Boyer has a lot to say in chapter 3 on this, about the history of premillennial thought, especially in the 1800s and early 19th century. He ends with this as he begins to look at World War II. As the war, that is World War II, raged on, prophecy writers found compelling empirical validation of their unfashionable but remarkably tenacious vision of human destiny. In other words, it wasn't really cool for the wider culture, but it somehow kept holding on to a certain constituency of America. When the conflict ended, that is the conflict of World War II, ended in searing atomic flashes that obliterated 2 cities, that apocalyptic reading of the war's meaning seems even more confirmed. So that's Boyer, and a key component of how it fits into what he's addressing. I just finished a book called Negotiating Science and Religion in America, Past, Present, and Future. And in it, I look at the context of the United States for how religion, science, and technology interrelate. And I want to read you a bit from that book as it relates to this premillennialism. So here's what I wrote about the relationship between premillennialism, postmillennialism, and amillennialism. So remember, these are all about when is the 1,000-year reign of Christ. So if it's Christ is returning before that 1,000-year reign, that's pre-millennialism. If it's after the 1,000-year reign, it's post-millennialism. And then there's this idea in the Calvinist or Reformed Protestant tradition of amillennialism. So here's what I wrote. Would Christ's return happen before a 1,000-year reign, premillennialism, or after a blessed age with a gradual increase of the Christian message and its ethics throughout the world, postmillennialism? The Calvinist heritage of Puritanism emphasized amillennialism, that is, that the 1,000-year reign of Christ was symbolic language because Christ was already reigning in heaven. But this view was being displaced or even forgotten in light of the growing premillennialism of the late 19th and early 20th century. So that ends the quotes. So when the fundamentalists come around, and you'll see much of this in Boyer's book, there's this discussion of the Scofield Reference Bible in 1909 and the growth of dispensationalism, which connects with the growth of premillennialism. And The idea that's really highlighted, that I found as I did research for my own book, is that as there was a fear of a growing urbanism, in other words, people moving to cities, a growth of immigration, and thus people who weren't Protestants, and the growth, and some who were not Christian, there was this fear that was happening in the early 20th century that America was losing its identity. Things that have come back today for sure. So that then led to the this idea of premillennialism. We can't make God's goodness on earth happen. So we have to just wait for Christ to do it, and then to reign on earth and to bring about what God wants in the world. So here's the important correlation for the sake of the end times thinking that we're looking at. Postmillennialism overall correlates with optimism in the ability of human actions, and premillennialism with pessimism. So in other words, we can do some stuff, that's the optimistic side, or we can't do anything, God has to do it all, that's the pessimistic side. So thus many contemporary end times Christian proclamation is pessimistic and premillennial. And you'll see some of that in other materials on the website.